Welcome to We Hope in God channel. Okay, let's unpack this. We've been spending some time reflecting on, well, a really powerful collection of scriptural verses. They're all centered on an immediate, pretty crucial theme, how we approach the holiness of God. So this deep dive isn't just about, ancient history. It feels like a vivid, unforgettable lesson about the difference between reverence and just utter carelessness when handling anything sacred.
That's exactly the mission today. And our sources, they anchor this discussion firmly in Numbers and Leviticus. It takes us right back to Israel just after the Exodus. They were in the wilderness, sure, but they weren't just wandering aimlessly. God was actively shaping them into his army and his kingdom of priests. That setup right there, it establishes this ultimate standard for devotion.
And the stakes.
Yeah.
Wow, right from the beginning, they were, well, existential, weren't they? The priestly function held by the Levites, and specifically Aaron and his sons, that was the absolute central point, the interaction between God and humanity. They were handling the weight of the sacred.
Exactly. It creates this foundational principle. If you have the unique privilege of drawing near to God, you absolutely must approach that calling with the full understanding of the gravity and, well, the glory of his holiness.
Okay, here's where the narrative gets truly breathtaking. We jump straight into the immediate aftermath of the high priest's consecration. It's detailed in Leviticus chapter 10, verses 1 through 3. The main characters here are Aaron's older sons, Nadab and Abihu. I didn't realize until really reading this material just how precise the description is. It says they took their censers, put fire in them, and added incense. Seems specific.
And this seemingly simple action, it became a catastrophic, fatal error. The crucial phrase, the absolute heart of this entire discussion, is that they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, contrary to his command. What's really fascinating is how the source material interprets this. It's not necessarily seen as just a complex, technical ritual mistake. So yes, technically it was unauthorized, but more as a profound failure of attitude.
Wait, hold on there. If they were offering fire and incense, which, that was part of their job, right? What exactly makes this specific fire unauthorized? I mean, if the consequence was immediate death by divine fire, the violation must have been incredibly serious, egregious.
Well, the sources really emphasize the element of carelessness and personal deviation. When you look at the whole context of the law being given, all the exact specifications for how God must be approached, their action signifies approaching the divine on their terms, not his. You see, they sort of introduced a personal element into a commanded act. They treated the holy calling lightly, almost as if the details didn't really matter.
And the consequence, immediate and terrifying. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. Fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Just imagine being in that camp. The high priest's own sons consumed instantly by divine fire. That completely shifts the whole atmosphere, doesn't it? Of worship, understanding God's nature, everything.
It certainly does. And Moses, right away, he provides the context for this judgment, which is the eternal principle we're really digging into today. Among those who approach me, I will be proved holy. In the sight of all the people, I will be honored. The Lord made it crystal clear that his holiness is, well, non-negotiable, especially for those who draw near to serve him.
And Aaron's response to this, the text just says, Aaron remained silent. Wow, that silence. After witnessing such severe justice fall upon his own children, it speaks volumes. It's noted in the reflection we looked at as a moment of just profound humility and obedience, like a recognition of God's sovereignty, even in the middle of immense grief.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how the sources actually reinforce this event later. They connect it to administrative details in Numbers chapter 3, which confirms the detail. They died before the Lord when they made an offering with unauthorized fire before him in the Desert of Sinai. And the sources highlight this repetition, that phrase, before the Lord. It appears twice. It really emphasizes the gravity. The violation happened precisely where God's presence was most manifest.
And it also confirms the long-term impact, right? The familial consequence. Since they didn't have any sons, the priestly line had to continue through their brothers Eleazar and Ithamar. So this single act of carelessness, it had generational impact.
Exactly. And the central insight the sources really extract from this tragedy is that contrast. You have Aaron, the father, carrying out his ministry with humility, grief, yes, but obedience. And then his sons, Nadab and Abihu, who, as the source puts it, treated the holy calling carelessly. That carelessness, that seems to be the true definition of unauthorized fire being offered here, the attitude. The lack of awe, the assumption that they could just dictate the terms of their service.
Okay, so if Nadab and Abihu's error wasn't about like the specific type of match they use, but the attitude they brought, this lack of reverence, where does our source material take that principle next? I mean, if the punishment was immediate death by fire, isn't it kind of understandable that the motivation for holiness might start with pure fear? Why do our sources seem to pivot almost immediately away from terror towards reverence and love?
That's a really critical question. The sources use this stark historical warning, yes, but they use it to point us toward a much greater sort of overarching promise. It's found in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 30. Those who honor me, I will honor, but those who despise me will be disdained. So the incident is a powerful historical reminder of holiness, absolutely. But the reflection part, it's designed to shift our focus, to move us from maybe paralyzing terror towards a more hopeful pursuit.
That shift feels fundamental, and the source clarifies the motivation really beautifully, I thought. Walking with God is not about fear of punishment, but about honoring his holiness and drawing near with reverence and love. It really transforms that fear into a pursuit of honor, of connection, which aligns so deeply with the grace we've received.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the source contrasts merely avoiding sin out of fear. We just want compliance, right? It contrasts that with the far greater, much more compelling goal, living in hope of the eternal reward of being with him. The ultimate grace, the reward that really guides our reverence, is belonging to the Creator who walks with us. That hope, that's what allows us to approach holiness with joy, not just dread.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener then. How do we take this intense kind of life or death concept of reverence and apply it to our regular 21st century lives? We don't use censers anymore or offer animal sacrifices. But the source suggests that standard for the priests back in the desert still calls for us to honor God with our hearts, words, and actions today. How does that work?
Yeah, this is the meat of the modern application, isn't it? If unauthorized fire is basically defined as carelessness in approaching what is sacred, then we have to identify what our sacred offerings are today. And the source specifically mentions 3 areas: our worship, prayers, and daily lives.
Okay, let's start with prayer. If we approach prayer carelessly, what does that actually look like today?
Well, I think it's often the offering of half-heartedness.
Right.
Maybe we rush our prayer time, or we were trying to pray while we're also checking emails or scrolling social media, multitasking prayer. We're essentially giving God the leftovers of our attention, offering him the fire of a distracted mind and calling it a sacred offering. That attitude, it risks treating the incredible privilege of direct communication as just another box to tick on the to-do list. The carelessness there is approaching the Creator on terms that kind of minimize his importance.
I see. So the modern unauthorized fire could be offering superficial or distracted time. That makes sense. What about worship then?
In worship, I think carelessness often shows up as just superficial engagement. We might go through the motions, right? Sing the songs, read the verses, stand up, sit down. But our hearts are maybe emotionally distant, untouched, or maybe focused entirely on ourselves and what we get out of it. We end up approaching the divine presence with a kind of rote, functional attitude, instead of genuine awe, humility, and importantly, the joy of belonging. The source is really asking us to bring the same kind of reverence Aaron displayed in his silence. Bring that to our spiritual disciplines, a focus and a gravity that acknowledges who we are addressing.
I see the connection. Yeah. It's about bringing that attitude of awe, that humility into things that can feel mundane sometimes. But what about our daily lives? The source mentions that too. That seems much broader, maybe further removed from the tabernacle context.
Not at all, actually. The source reminds us that we are still called a kingdom of priests. So if our very lives are meant to be a holy offering, then carelessness shows up when we compromise our ethics, maybe in small ways we think don't matter, or when our words and actions towards other people are inconsistent with the love and grace we say we've received. Every interaction, every decision at work, every word spoken to family, that's our offering. It's all sacred ground in a way.
So offering unauthorized fire in daily life might look like cutting corners ethically, or maybe speaking carelessly about others, because we've forgotten that our entire being is meant to be, like the source says, a small light for Christ. We've treated the holy calling of just being a follower careless.
That's the exact insight the source draws out. The contrast is stark. It's between offering our lives carelessly versus offering them with the joy of knowing we belong to the Creator. The goal is derived from these reflections, maybe during quiet time, what the source mentions, is for each day's actions and meditations to be that small light for your walk with Christ, filled with joy as you seek him. It's about elevating the seemingly routine into the sacred through intentionality and reverence.
This really moves the lesson from being just a terrifying historical footnote to becoming a profound daily examination of our hearts and actions. The overall insight we pull from these sources seems really clear. The narrative of Nadab and Abihu serves as this vivid, unforgettable illustration of the eternal principle that among those who draw near, God demands and will be honored as holy.
Absolutely. And that transformation moving from the intensity of the historical warning to a hopeful daily application of reverence, joy, and hope, that is the grace we are meant to receive from this text. So the challenge really remains for you, the listener. Are the daily offerings of your actions, your words, your prayers, are they marked by that carelessness that defined the unauthorized fire? Or are they characterized by the deep reverence and joy that comes from knowing we belong to the Creator?
Yeah, that's the core question. If the Lord was shaping his people into a kingdom of priests way back then, what does that concept imply about the reverence we should bring to even the most mundane parts of our own daily lives today? Maybe reflect on what unauthorized fire, that spirit of carelessness, that half-heartedness might look like specifically in your routine this week. That's definitely the thought to carry forward and maybe explore on your own.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material.
When Israel walked out of chains, God led them through desert plains, calling them his chosen ones. A kingdom of priests had begun. Aaron served with humble heart, set apart for sacred part. But his sons with careless hands brought strange fire, broke his command. In his presence we draw near. God is holy, pure and clear. Honor him with reverent love. Seeking him is joy enough. Holy, holy God above, we will honor you in love. Only you our hearts desire. Set our souls in holy fire. When Israel walked out of chains, God led them through desert plains, calling them his chosen ones. A kingdom of priests had begun. Aaron served with humble heart, set apart for sacred part. But his sons with careless hands brought strange fire, broke his command.